I just want to start out with the panel. Obviously, we have three big heavy hitters from the storage industry on the panel today. So if you guys could just give a quick introduction, kind of your role within your organization, and so forth.
Sure. So I'm Eric Herzog, Chief Marketing Officer and Vice President Global Storage Channels for IBM. I've done storage for 35 years. Also worked at EMC, which is also on the panel. Done 7 storage startups. Hard drive business, tape drive business. So if it's storage, whether it be storage software, storage systems, I've done it in the past, and I'm still continuing to do it.
And my name is Kirk, Kern, Chief Technology Officer for NetApp Americas. I consider myself a technology evangelist. I work with my customers directly, help empower them to, take on that modernization journey. Actually, at NetApp, we call it the digital transformation as opposed to a modernization, because it incorporates all aspects of people, process, technology, all the changes that are required in order to generate a more competitive environment, or in the case of government, more effective services for the citizens.
Good afternoon. My name is Chehreh. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and also Vice President for Pre-Sales Engineering for Dell Technologies Federal Systems. I really look at my role as more of a mission partner, mission evangelist. We have a full portfolio of capability, but at the end of the day, it's no good if you can't get it out into the mission segments and make it effective for use in the public sector and civilian DoD and intelligence community environments. So really a customer advocate, so to speak, for all of our mission partners.
Thank you. So I think we'll start off. We've heard a lot about the kind of the data-driven world that we're living in. Obviously, the agencies have a lot of missions around, the president's management agenda on what we do with the data, how we get the data, where the data sits. And you guys all talk to a lot of agencies, whether it's the federal side or on the commercial side. Can you just kind of give a little, where do they start this journey of how do they kind of wrap their heads around really all these data pools that we're going to start seeing as more and more IoT and edge type computing devices and hybrid cloud kind of come into play? And we'll start here with you, Eric.
So I think the first thing that everyone needs to realize is data is the new gold. Data is the new oil. And whether you recall the article that was actually in The Economist back in 2017, which all storage companies use, which is data is the new oil. Okay, and the reality is if you don't understand the value of your data, you don't understand the value of what you're doing for your customers and your potential customers, okay, and the areas of where you're going to go. You also need to realize that it's all about your data, but there's a foundation underneath that data. All data on this planet, in every sector, government, healthcare, regular commercial accounts, the education sector, all of it is sitting on storage somewhere. So if your storage is not performant, is not resilient, is not available, then those application workloads and use case are not going to deliver what you need to do to your customers and clients globally.
Good one. So I'll take a slightly different approach on this. I think everyone that's sitting in the room and everyone that's attending this event today probably fit into 3 categories. It's people that own infrastructure, people that operate infrastructure, or people that consume infrastructure. And in the next 2 to 5 years, with modernization and where modern software advances are taking us, if you're in those first 2 categories, you're probably going to be looking for a new job. And what replaces those first 2 categories, the own and operate, is kind of clear, right? You're going to start to consume services, data services from cloud service providers, or potentially from other organizations within the federal government. And then as you start to advance in that consumption aspect, you're going to start to see a new breed of software development come into play. And I encourage everyone, if you haven't seen the Site Reliability Engineering book, it's an O'Reilly book out there. It's started in Google, and all aspects of software engineering or software programming is taken into account in terms of how it consumes or uses the infrastructure. And so an SRE will encompass those first 2 buckets and start to take advantage of everything that can be brought to bear in this modern or this digital transformation. And then they manage all aspects of the delivery of the capability from top down. And so if you haven't gotten a copy of that, you'll go off and see that, because that's where those first 2 buckets are gonna change. And then on the back end, the 3rd category, the consumer, right? They're gonna benefit from all the new capabilities that are gonna be built into this modern infrastructure.
So David, I'm going to peel a little different aspect of that question back. Having the privilege to work both with government and also commercial customers, it's kind of fascinating You know, when I first got into this business, I got into it because the S&T branches of government were the coolest places ever in technology to work, right? You're playing with some of the most incredible lean forward technology. Years go on and, you know, commercial sector takes a little bit of that gravitas from the government, but I really think we're in a time burgeoning once again where the government is really leading the way in a lot of areas. Even though we're in the middle of it, we don't see it. I'll give you a very clear example. I was meeting with the CTO of Tesla cars, and they're trying to solve some pretty, you know, big problems. And he says, hey, I want to be able to push an update to every single driving Tesla 7 times a day. He's like, when you guys work with the Air Force or you work with the Navy, how do you do this from a data management, data infrastructure? What's the digital transformation look like to be able to do that for things that are afloat when they become disconnected or come back into a connected comms environment?
They had to tell them the truth.
You got to tell, and that's the real testament to where we're really at from a digital transformation. Is commercial is now looking at government for these best practices, and we're seeing a lot of this emerge. Whether it's the cybersecurity standards that the prior 2 administrations have pushed out, or the new EOs around artificial intelligence, we're at the forefront of something very, very different with digital transformation, and it's creating leapfrog moments, I think, for government missions to be able to take full advantage of this and keep our advantage to our near-peer nation states that we all know are out there.
Yeah, I think when you start looking at, you know, the amount of communication, if you think of some of the earlier sessions today, you know, we can throw a lot of technology and a lot of different types of solution to fix some things. But I think we still got to, you know, when we think about the communication side, breaking down those kind of traditional infrastructure silos so we can understand where the process is broken to give them better data insights, whether it's technical insights or really on the business side. So I think that was a great kind of follow-up. When we think about cloud, we've heard some things, aspects of cloud. You know, everybody's trying to get to cloud in some way at an executive aspect. But I've seen a lot of things within the industry now on more around, you know, really the cloud attributes or really the service orientation of which cloud can bring. It's no longer, I need to put it in the cloud, but I like that self-service kind of mentality. So just give a little example of what you guys are doing within your own organizations to really help the journey for our, you know, whether it's the agencies or on the public side for the journey to the cloud.
I'll be happy to start with that one because I love to be a little provocative on this topic. Because cloud is a little bit of a misnomer for a lot of people. We've actually been doing cloud since 1996. And I was fortunate enough to help build the first cloud computing company. It's right out of a little town in Annapolis. You know, if everyone remembers US Center Networking, it was the precursor to what was actually happening before hypervisors were invented. The government's in a very interesting place here where I think there's going to be a leapfrog over cloud because the word cloud eventually will be removed from our vernacular in the next 2 to 3, maybe 4 years. Because it'll become part of mainstream modern engineering, right? This API, service-driven economy. When you look at cloud today, it's really an operating model. It's not a destination. Even though we're a huge partner and fan of AWS and Azure, that's looking at cloud as a destination, not as a mission capability, right? So when you do things like we do where you're deploying tactical portable clouds in the back of Humvee vehicles or FEMA first response vehicles to be able to bring down UAV feeds and check for, you know, human life during a disaster, or intelligence community, or even, you know, in the back of Abrams tanks. I mean, this is cloud in a mission context. It's not a destination. It's an operating model of leveraging the principles of cloud to give you the agility necessary for mission execution. So it is all about the operating model, and it is a multi-cloud world, and it will continue to be that as we get more pervasively into the mission segment because of the digital transformation that's occurring.
So I guess I could pile on that and go this way. And, you know, when Vivek Kundra published his 2011, you know, Cloud First initiative, I think the government sort of over pivoted and went, you know, 100% in the, you know, the concept was, you know, all in cloud, cloud first. And I think some of the more recent guidance that came out with Cloud Smart, for instance, really is an acknowledgement that you're going to settle into an environment where you use cloud judiciously, right? You will use it to its advantages, especially if you can take advantage the elastic and scalable properties, or maybe you jump in and you use some of the clever software, like Lambda services or something like that. But ultimately, what we're seeing now is that the world's settling into a hybrid environment, right? There will be some assets on-prem, there will be some consumption in the cloud, and there'll be multi-cloud as well. So it's going to be a hybrid multi-cloud world. That being said, you said, what are we doing about it? NetApp stepped in about 5 years ago, and we said, we think it's going to settle into a hybrid world. We're going to give customers the ability to start in the cloud, and if they find out that costs are unexpected, or maybe they're not achieving the return on investment, they'll bring some of that workload home. Maybe not all of it, maybe all of it. And so we're starting to see this conversation now about how do we cost optimize our consumption of our resources, whether they be on-prem or whether they're in the cloud. But for customers that are already operating existing data centers, right, the data center consolidation initiative went pretty far. I don't know what the final number was, but closing thousands of data centers, getting down to 2 or 3 major data centers for most agencies. But now, that because they've done all that work, there's been, I think, somewhat of a lag, and they haven't done the modernization of those assets on-prem. And so if it's going to be a hybrid world, you need to modernize what you've got on-prem so that you're prepared to use some of these cloud services. You have to start using some of the same paradigms that you're going to get from the cloud on-prem, and then that gives you the ability to change your processes so that you can, have users, directly access a service on-prem or leverage a service in the cloud, or spin this thing back and forth as necessary if an elastic condition hits and you need to, do surge or burst processing in the cloud. So I think it's going to be an interesting world as we start to evolve and figure out how do we, use software programming to take advantage of all the resources available to us.
Yep.
So we view cloud as a way to manage your IT business, okay? Whether you're using a public cloud provider, but essentially all data centers are clouds. No one's got a traditional data center anymore. That's like way gone. So when you think about a hybrid cloud, and we would agree with NetApp, we see, especially in the enterprise side, most big global Fortune 500s are shifting away from trying to be 100% public cloud. And the reason is security issues, performance issues, and literally sit there with a spreadsheet, work the price out. Yeah. Every time you move data back and forth, all cloud providers, whether it be IBM Cloud, Amazon, Azure, and the thousands of cloud providers globally. If you want 5 nines or 6 nines availability, got to charge you for that. You want this SLA on performance? We got to charge you for that. And by the way, we're still charging you for heavily transactional workloads. So what a lot of enterprise shops are doing is for most transactional workloads, they're on-prem, usually in what I'll call a private cloud, where they have the same agility and flexibility that Amazon or Azure, IBM, or Google will claim that you get from a public cloud, but doing it in their own data center, if you will, and having that level of security that makes them comfortable. Being able to move data back and forth seamlessly, and we've got a lot of software that automatically moves data back and forth to any public cloud provider you want, back up to the cloud, tier to the cloud, see the capability of moving data seamlessly back and forth to cloud. But you got to view cloud as actually not a destination. It's actually just a way you run IT. And in some cases, it's not in your shop, and in other cases, in your shop. But that idea of the agility, the flexibility, moving things back and forth using APIs, if you're not doing that in your own data center and then using the public cloud providers for other functions, then you're sort of missing what you need. So it's absolutely a hybrid cloud world, and it's really, what do you use your public cloud provider for, and what do you use your own cloud for, and making it seamless in moving data back and forth as you need to.
Yeah, and I'll be happy when the lift and shift type conversations end here, taking everything and just trying to move everything to the cloud. Numerous discussions around that, and as they're trying to do that exploratory. So is there any particular use case you think potentially a public cloud makes sense for? Is it backup type applications or any other services or use cases you want to drive towards?
So I'll start. We see a few things. So clearly archive, backup, and disaster recovery technology. All of those with the right security around them. Okay, when you're moving the data, it's got to be encrypted while it's in flight. And by the way, you better make sure whatever cloud provider you're using has encrypted on their premise too, because now it's over on their side. So you don't want to ever lose security control of that. So we would argue it's, disaster recovery. Okay, I'm from Silicon Valley. We really do have earthquakes. I was in the 1989 quake. I actually lived through it. I did fall down 2 flights of stairs, by the way, because I was trying to go to a bar to watch the A's and the Giants play. So, you got to be aware of all these natural disasters. So you need DR. By the way, the most common form of data loss still is people. And for all the fire suppression systems, second is still fire, Earthquake, flood, tornado, that's like way down the pole. It's really people and fire are the two most common forms of data loss. So you want to make sure that you can move data around flexibly. So backup, archive, and DR are the three ones that we see. Doesn't mean you can't do certain things. If you want to do some software as a service with a service right, but again, you better make sure that thing is secure as heck. And that's not just a government statement. There isn't, Herzog's Bar and Grill needs to have security, let alone Bank of America or Toyota. And every government agency, big, medium, or small, whether it be federal, state, or local, all of them need that level of security. So that's something you need to be careful and make sure you get with whatever public cloud provider you use if you're going to have what, again, we would agree with NetApp, is definitely a hybrid cloud, multi-cloud world. It's not going to be all, let's all run to Amazon or whoever. That's not going to work. And the enterprise side of the world absolutely has backed off of that stance.
Yep, agree wholeheartedly. There's also some, you touched on some of the PaaS and SaaS platforms, though. And I think that's a real easy one. You know, not a lot of people operate their own infrastructure anymore for email services and, you know, file sharing services. So you're going to consume something like an Office 365. I'm not here to do a commercial, but, you know, O365, you see a lot of people consuming that en masse now. When you start looking at software development tool chains, there's a lot of that stuff pre-populated as a platform. Why build an IaaS and go off and then load all your software packages? You can get that pretty much turnkey. So if you need an agile, quick software development environment to fire up, and if you're starting to do continuous integration as opposed to agile, that's where you'd start to consume cloud services. I mean, in seconds, you've got a full development suite, and you can go off and deploy to ops in seconds. And you know, really, the goal is to start to write new applications at the speed that the infrastructure runs at. There's a I forget the publisher, forgive me if I'm wrong, someone will probably fact check me, but I believe it was Forrester, and they did a study that in the next 4 years, they will develop more applications in the next 4 than have been developed in the past 40. So think about that. I mean, the applications are going to be just, you know, coming online in minutes to days. They get deployed to operations. They change dynamically in real time, and then they may retire at some point where another one comes in and takes its place. The point is to lift and shift. You're absolutely right. That's really not working any longer, because with these new app factories, you can do a couple microservice calls, spin up a cluster, build the pods, load in all the software. I can build a SQL database that, you know, crosses 100 nodes in literally 20 minutes, 20 seconds is more like it, and you know, put in a web front end, run Nginx, fire off my software programmers, and within a week I can do what used to be a big giant monolithic application. And so that's where the world's headed. And so, you know, I think you use cloud whenever you're starting this new world, you know, this next gen programming.
Yeah, so for me, our company was founded on a principle about advancing human potential. So where I see cloud and that intersection is in the advancement for health science use cases where you can do genomic sequencing, you could do things where you need hyperscale quick to be able to solve problems in a much faster manner. The RDT&E community, rate research and development, test evaluation. The cloud has proven to be a great instrument for advancing capability. What we are finding is a lot of people move those workloads back to a more balanced hybrid cloud strategy on premise, because when you look at the long-term value of it from a dollars and cents or a mission perspective, you begin to realize that what cloud did to all of us as traditional providers was disrupted our business model, right? I think what people are learning about cloud, though, beyond the workload, is the financial promise that was there is not, right? Because people are getting a lot of their initial bills. They're seeing a lot of the hidden charges. I refer to it as the dim sum lunch, right? You go out, you're expecting to pay $2 a plate for dim sum with all your friends, right? So you're thinking that's a nice cheap lunch. Invited 4 friends, you had a couple of beers, and next thing you know it, you're getting a $200 bill, and you're going, how did we just spend $200, right? So, you know, cloud has that challenge. So there's a pendulum that's swinging back to a more practical, very pragmatic approach. But to advance research and development, advance the sciences, where you need more of this crowdsourcing capability to solve real problems and advance human potential, those are great use cases. But when you're talking about missions and you're talking about operations, and especially if you're in the DoD and you've got, you know, warfighter lives at a tip of the spear type of environment, or even first responders, you got to take a practical approach to where you balance where those workloads really sit.
Yeah, and as we continue to progress forward, you brought up something, Kurt, around some of the microservices that customers or infrastructures are starting to kind of evolve into beyond. We had the compute platform, then we came out with server virtualization, which really helped with a lot of consolidation. Now we see this pretty huge trend into Docker and Kubernetes and all these kind of microservices that you can spin up and down. What do you feel the role of storage has, and is it evolving quick enough to handle some of these new services?
Yeah, well, it depends on who you talk to, right? If you're the DevOps guy, he wants to know nothing about infrastructure. There's no storage associated with it, right? Just give me my pipeline. I write my code, and it runs magically somewhere, right? And that's the way it should be, right? So he's enabled in that scenario. There's actually some interesting conversations about how you consume storage in a microservice world. Typically, microservices start and stop on the fly. They tend to consume ephemeral storage, right? So the storage disappears at the same time the app disappears. There are technologies. We've got one that's out there that also lets you do persistent volume services along with your ephemeral services. So in the traditional app world, you write an application. It either produces data or consumes data. You want to preserve that at some point. That's where we start to have some storage function in the microservices world. But fundamentally, what I think is happening is, the developers are really, they're in charge of the future. They have the ability to do dramatic things now. Without any sort of regard for what the infrastructure is behind them. And it's going to be the great neutralizer for all infrastructure and all IT companies for that matter, right? So if you develop in a modern DevSecOps world, deploy applications through microservices and containers, you can deploy those on-prem on infrastructure that you can kind of grow yourself, or you can target any one of the clouds that are out there in the hyperscalers or even in some of the smaller service provider world. And you've now got an ability to literally migrate workloads on the fly in real time. You can scale these services up, shut them off. It's going to be a dramatic change. Instead of running a bunch of heavyweight virtual machines on a single server to drive up utilization, now you can take advantage of every flop and every IOP that's available in the infrastructure. So out in the forward tactical world, if they're not rewriting their applications, that's a travesty, right? So that really, it is the time now where it makes sense to take your money and invest it in software development, writing the new software, take advantage of app factories, and get away from the sort of the traditional IT stacks that we enjoy today.
Yeah, I think dovetailing a little bit off what Kirk's saying here, David, is DevOps is going to be the most extraordinary thing that we will experience in the last 20 to 30 years. We talked about the application boom. Kirk was talking to me earlier. He said, a lot of the applications are going to be built in the next 4 years will outpace what we just built in the last 40, right? When you think about that, these applications are producing data. These applications sometimes are not human-to-machine interface, they're machine-to-machine interface, or I could tell you we use AI pervasively in our company, and that's all producing data and information that we have to be able to store, analyze, and inspect, right? So containerization, any way you look at it, is going to be an extraordinary challenge and change for all of us before, because it's going to explode your data management requirements.
I'm glad you brought that up. There's another report out there that, so I already gave you the prediction of which two groups are going to lose their jobs. The software programmers, while we're talking about how valuable they're going to be by 2025, they're saying that AI can do a majority of the work that the DevOps guys are doing. So you're actually going to have these AI bot services, out and develop code. And if, you can give it some rudimentary things, it needs to acquire data, normalize, process, put it into a SQL environment or key value store, and then publish it out in a pretty graphic. You can have an AI service actually build that for you. So the pace of change is unbelievable, because what's happening is it's like a layer cake, right? You start with some orchestration and automation, the modernization we're talking about, that now gives you programmatic control of all your resources. So then you spin the DevOps guys on top of that and say, hey, go take advantage of all this new capability. And then from there, like, okay, we don't need a DevOps guy anymore. We'll get an AI engine, put that on there to do exactly what the DevOps guy is doing. And so it's going to be an unbelievable change of pace between now and 2025.
So what we see at IBM is the key thing is, again, transparent with a container environment. All of us were transparent with virtualized environments, whether it be VMware, Hyper-V, KVM, even Oracle Virtualization Manager, and now we're all transparent with container environments. Remember, the amount of data being created is not shrinking, it's growing exponentially. So before it was on bare metal, then it was a virtualized engine. Now it's going to be sitting in some virtualization and containers. You still need to store your data. It still needs to be performant. It still needs to be transparent. Still needs to be resilient, and it still needs to be available. In fact, I'd argue even more so because in the era of containers, where when the app goes away, the storage goes away, unless you have storage persistence, which all of us have products that continue to have storage persistence like we all did with virtual machines. The reality is, if you're going to have an app and process data, you still need to process data, which means it's still got to be stored on something. The issue is making it persistent, making it available, making it performant, making it serviceable, all the key things that storage did when it was bare metal, the key things storage did when it was in a virtual environment, and the key thing it's going to do in container is still the same. The details may change on how you connect to that environment. If you can't move data transparently around and the data fails or the storage is slow, so the data's slow, I don't care if you develop that app through a container or in the old way. The reality is the app is slow to the end users. And that means you're hurting the service to the end users of what you're trying to perceive. So storage is still that critical foundation, whether it be a traditional world, a virtualized world, or in the coming world of containers, it's still the critical foundation underneath everything. Everything gets stored all data is stored on storage, all of it. So storage still matters, even in a world of containers. Just how do the storage companies optimize around a container environment? That's the key issue.
And when we start thinking about optimization, we've heard a lot today around automation. I know there's a big conference in town today on the robotic process automation, which is more of the people process of understanding the process and how can we do that automation through robotics. When we think about it from an infrastructure aspect, and you guys have already kind of started talking about connecting a lot of these dots from the underlying infrastructure to cloud, to the kind of the microservices container. Is there anything that you guys are bringing to the table to, if they're going to have 5 clouds and 5 different places to go, how do we start tying that underlying API infrastructure so we don't have to write 5 different applications to efficiently move data around? Are you guys providing that upper layer abstraction layer for these customers so it looks the same no matter where that data is going around automation?
Well, all storage companies are working on making data movement transparent.
Yep.
So it's got to be transparent to the multiple clouds. In fact, there was a survey done of enterprise accounts, and the average enterprise, and I would argue most of the government agencies are basically like an enterprise shop. You have a different mission, but you're still as big as a B of A, or as big as a Toyota, or maybe in some cases even bigger. Okay, so you still have to serve your clients, which is really us, because we're your taxpayers. So we're actually your customers up here on the stage. Not that you're not ours, but we're really yours, right? You provide all the services to us and our families. But the key thing is you've got to be able to make sure that that data is always there and can easily move around. And that's what we do. So the average enterprise is going to use between 5 and 9 public cloud providers. 5 to 9. Okay, why? You have differences in the enterprise world about being all over the world. By the way, don't a lot of US government agencies do, quote, business all over the world? Yes, they do. Okay, you also have it for price. Usually you don't just go to one guy, and yes, there's a lot of government contracts that tend to focus that way, but in the enterprise world, they don't. They make sure that they go to IBM Cloud and to Amazon and to Azure and play them off against each other to help negotiate pricing. So those are the issues why data, multi-cloud world, move it around transparently and make it easy to move data around, and essentially transparent to the infrastructure team, transparent to the application teams, transparent to everyone. And that's what all of us are working on. We all have products that do that to some degree or another. Some of us have several products that do it. May not be one product yet, so that's the difference. We have file, block, and object protocols, but the reality is all of us can move data around transparently depending on which of the protocol we support, or in some instances we support all 3. So we're making it so it's easy for you guys to use storage in a container world, in a multi-cloud world, for the new wave of the future.
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of dovetail on that. With the proliferation of all these API services, there then becomes, I think, a necessity within the government agencies to go off and start a, for lack of a better term, a data pedigree program or project, where you tag all the information so that you can put that into a metadata repository so you understand what you have. I live here in the DMV area, and Dawn Myricks is pretty prolific on a lot of these circuits, and she talks about what they're doing in the intelligence community. And at a recent event, she stated that they have over 1,000 people tagging information or tagging data in the IC complex. Right? She sees that as such a critical activity that they've dedicated a ton of resources to tag all the information that they have so that they can create metadata resources where they can do lookups, they can understand the information that they have, and then they can call the automation and orchestration APIs to do what they want against the data. And so if you don't have a chief data officer in your organization or you don't have a metadata program of some sort, it might be an opportunity to go off and maybe do some investigation and research on what's involved in creating metadata repositories that help you catalog and index all the information that's out there. Once you have that, then the API calls are simple, right? You can set your software developers off on a program and have them do clever things with the data and generate that intelligence. But if you don't have an ability to orchestrate and manage it, it's going to be difficult. So that's when it kind of goes back on the agencies that they have to do work.
So David, I'm going to take a point off the curve, come back to your original question about moving to a multi-cloud, because it's always fun. We've got a full portfolio to play with, right? We're literally one of the last companies to have a full end-to-end capability. I look well beyond the storage because it is about information and it's about how information gets transitioned into knowledge. Software-defined networking is going to be one of the biggest disruptive things we're going to see in a very, very long time. Because when we talk about security and being able to take and extend your control boundary for security, using software-defined networking, I can project that into my multi-cloud or hybrid cloud environment, but I still maintain the keys and I still maintain the management, which is vital for all agencies, right? The second thing is all about the data protection necessary and the encryption to be able to move that data as an object so that I can determine where it's best suited to be, but I still, again, control my own destiny with regards to cyber. This gives us the opportunity to do things like isolated cyber recovery, right? I have an attack, or I experience an attack, I experience corruption of data. I now have what I need necessary to rapidly reconstitute the enterprise necessary to be able to deal with the data environments. We're pulling some lessons learned from some of our commercial customers. We have commercial customers, consider Wall Street, that literally, because of the technology we have in our portfolio, they're rebuilding their entire networks every 3 days. So what they took was a page out of IARPA's book regarding moving threat target defense, right? Why would I create a static environment for an adversary to map and an adversary to attack? So can I reconstitute using virtualization, massive amounts of automation, and all of these fourth industrial revolution style technologies? Why would I create a static environment? So they are literally reconstituting their networks every 3 days and regenerating what the network looks like to be able to keep adversaries off of the network. And it's incredible when we see these best practices flowing between government and commercial back into government. So from a multi and hybrid cloud, all of these strategies are being employed to protect the sovereignty of the core data. It's well beyond storage. It's the medium and the automation itself.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point on being more proactive and providing the knowledge back to the respective organizations. And I know all three of your companies do a lot around analytics and telemetry type information around the solutions or the infrastructure or even the platforms or software that you guys are selling. As we wrap up here the last 5 minutes, maybe give a little bit of some of those insights that you're bringing back off that telemetry information that can continue to help the agencies as they move forward, whether it's redoing their infrastructure every 3 days or helping pinpoint the problem before it becomes a problem.
Yeah, for us, telemetry data is, right, information's power.
Yep.
Right? If you can go to a customer proactively or to a mission and say, look, at the end of the day, I'm looking at your telemetry data, and what this is telling me is you have this much that's cold, take it off the network, isolate it, reduce your attack surface. You've had 2 users address this corpus of information in the last 5 years. This user group or this corpus of data is being accessed at this point in time. Here's what it's telling me. Here's the regions that are accessing it. I can now micro-segment my network to focus the quality of service into that constituent base using the telemetry information. And it really is about working smarter networks, using automation to be smarter about what data is being accessed, what's not. Because I don't know about any of you all, but I've received my 5th notice from OPM about the breach and the clearances and all this fun stuff. It is about reducing the attack surface, reducing what's out there and your corpus of information. and doing that as you move forward and using that telemetry data to make smart, informed decisions.
So for us, we've been cultivating a data lake of telemetry information from all our assets that are out in customer environments, and they're willing to share that telemetry information with us. We started a project about 18 months ago where we wanted to use an artificial intelligence engine to generate better customer support experience. Typically we would mine some of that data, give them storage efficiency reports, stranded storage analysis, all kinds of nice things, but it was a monthly thing. And the day and age of customer wants all that in their hand, on their phone, and in real time was a challenge for us. And so we moved from what was traditionally a batch processing, a Hadoop job that would run through and create all that information, to now an agent where, when a customer logs in or makes a request, we kick off an AI service that goes through, identifies the information associated with that customer, and then starts to do proactive reporting on that. The initial goal of that, however, had a digital KPI in front of it, right? And the KPI was that we wanted to solve 70% of the P1 cases on first touch, right? So the first case comes in, we want to be able to close that out on first touch. We use that AI engine to do that. We're trending somewhere around 68% right now, so that was really good. But now that we've got that infrastructure in play, we can start to do all these additive services. On top of that, now we go off and we can spin up jobs where, say you have a volume that's, really being taxed or highly utilized, and we notice, for instance, that the latency and the jitter start to happen. We can change some of the software parameters to improve performance. We're also doing other things now where we detect that this information isn't protected at all. We can kick off a service in a cloud and actually do a real-time backup of that capability so that the customer is protected. We're starting to move to an era where if you have that telemetry information, that's the data about your data, and then you can invoke service constructs or service modules in order to give you a better environment and a more resilient environment. And so that's kind of where we're starting to see a lot of these additive services come on top of something as simple as telemetry data in a data lake.
So we use telemetry from an end user perspective in two ways. First of all, the proactive support, whether something as simple as a power supply failed or a fan failed, we can automatically generate a replacement. Now we do obviously ask your permission because we're basically telling you power supply 1 is dead, you should replace it and let us ship you one, right? And obviously there's some business aspect of us shipping you get receiving it, et cetera, you shipping it back. Simple stuff like that, but again, using the telemetry data for all that. The other thing we've done is create a data ocean. I'm going to call it a lake. We call it an ocean because there's so much data. And in that data ocean, the idea is customers can go in and do best practices. So we can look at, in order to configure your Oracle database, this company, and it's all anonymous, so no one knows, but it says, in order to run this workload, here's how it's configured for Oracle. This workload on Mongo is constructed this way, and allows the users through telemetry data to actually share their experience. Now, some people don't want to, so if you don't want to share it, right? In the commercial world, it could be because it could be viewed as competitive advantage. I can make that Oracle run faster to process banking transactions, for example. In the government, maybe security concerns, but mostly just how to use the storage better with your applications, workloads, and use cases. That's what you can use that telemetry, and it is all completely anonymous. So no one knows whether it came from the IRS or whether it came from Toyota or whether it came from Bank of America, right? It's all anonymous, and you don't have to use it, don't have to participate. So telemetry to help with the support experience and proactively tell you you're running out of capacity or wow, you look like you're running slow, and proactively tell you that, as well as break fix stuff, but also to allow you to tune your environment better based on your application workload and use case, and share that. And some companies are totally open to sharing, others don't want to, but you can turn it on or turn it off. And then obviously if you turn it off, then obviously we don't want you sharing other person's data either. So we make it, you got to have sort of a two-way street, but it's all anonymous. Allows people to share how they run their storage for certain applications, workloads, and use cases. And by the way, how you configure the underlying infrastructure does vary by application, workload, and use case. You're not going to configure storage for an archive the way you are for the highest performance database you need to run certain workloads. You don't configure the storage the same way. So you got to make sure you've got, if you will, the right tool for the right job. And the telemetry helps you create the right tool. Is it a chainsaw? Is it a hammer? Is it a screwdriver? And that's how you can do that, by looking at the telemetry data, and then make sure you're using the right tool. You do not go cut down a tree with a hammer. And God forbid you take a chainsaw to pound a nail in your house. It would not be a very nice experience.
Yeah, I think it's good. We see the vendor community coming together to really help solve some of these, extreme kind of infrastructure data challenges. I got to say, I haven't heard the data ocean yet. I mean, a couple of years ago, we were data pond, so I appreciate the
We're all
new
trying to
coin
outdo
phrase.
each other, David.
I'm waiting for that to go viral in the technology industry on the data ocean pools. But again, Cameron, Kurt, Eric, I want to appreciate you guys spending your time today. Whether it's the breakout session or the kind of the following panel here, a lot of good insights as we look at kind of the future of where the modernization's going, from the IT constructs. So thank you again.
Great, thank you.